There is a moment when you first ride into St. Denis that changes everything. You've spent dozens of hours in the wilderness, among mountains and forests and open plains, and then suddenly the world shifts. The dirt paths become cobblestone streets. The birdsong becomes the clatter of trolleys and the shouts of vendors. The open sky becomes a haze of smoke and smog. And you realise that you're not in the Old West anymore. You're in the future, and the future is terrifying. This transition is not just visual, it is visceral. The tempo of the game changes. In the Heartlands, you can gallop for miles without seeing a soul. Here, you cannot trot 5 feet without colliding with a pedestrian, a carriage, or a lamppost. The game mechanics themselves seem to conspire against you, punishing the freedom of movement you've taken for granted. To run in St. Denis is to invite chaos. To shoot is to invite death. You must walk, you must wait, you must obey traffic laws. For a character like Arthur Morgan, whose entire identity is built on autonomy, this enforced regulation is suffocating. The sensory overload is immediate. The smell of the city, a mix of coal smoke, unwashed bodies, exotic spices and horse manure, seems to seep through the screen. The light is different here too. Sunlight struggles to penetrate the smog, creating a permanent sepia-toned haze during the day, while at night, the artificial glare of electric street lamps creates harsh, unnatural shadows. It is a world of sharp edges and hard surfaces, indifferent to the soft, organic rhythms of nature. Entering St. Denis feels less like discovering a new location and more like crashing into a wall. It is the end of the line, both geographically and metaphorically. St. Denis is the largest city in Red Dead Redemption 2, and it's unlike anything else in the game. It's a sprawling metropolis of over 80,000 souls, a place of industry and commerce, of wealth and poverty, of civilization and corruption. It's based on New Orleans at the turn of the 20th century, and like its real-world counterpart, it's a city of contradictions, a place where the old world and the new world collide in ways that are beautiful and brutal and endlessly fascinating. But St. Denis is more than just a setting. It's a character in its own right, a living, breathing entity that shapes everyone who enters it. It's the place where the Van der Linde gang's dreams finally die, where the promise of freedom gives way to the reality of a world that has no place for outlaws. It's the city that represents everything Dutch Van der Linde claims to hate, and everything that's come in whether he likes it or not. Let's explore this remarkable place, from its muddy streets to its gilded mansions, from its sordid history to its uncertain future. The history of St. Denis stretches back centuries, long before the events of Red Dead Redemption 2. The city was founded by French colonists in the early 18th century, established as a trading post at the mouth of the Lanahetchee River. The location was strategic, providing access to the Gulf and the interior of the continent, making it an ideal hub for commerce and transportation. The French influence shaped the city's character in ways that persist to the present day. The architecture, the cuisine, the culture, all bear the unmistakable stamp of French colonial heritage. The street names are French. The oldest families speak French. The very rhythm of life in Saint-Denis has a distinctly Gallic flavour, a certain joie de vivre that sets it apart from the more austere Anglo-American cities to the north. But the French were not the only influence on Saint-Denis. The city changed hands multiple times over the centuries, passing from French to Spanish control and eventually becoming part of the United States. Each transition left its mark, adding layers of culture and history that make St. Denis one of the most complex and cosmopolitan cities in the country. The Spanish period brought new architectural styles, new traditions, new families seeking fortune in the New World. The American period brought industrialization, expansion, and the relentless drive for progress that would transform St. Denis from a colonial outpost into a modern metropolis. The Civil War left deep scars on the city. St. Denis was occupied by Union forces for much of the conflict, and the aftermath of the war brought profound changes to the social order. The end of slavery transformed the economy and the demographics of the city, creating new opportunities and new tensions that would shape St. Denis for generations to come. From around the world dock at the city's wharves, bringing goods and people from distant lands. The river also provides water for industry, powering the factories and mills that have made St. Denis an economic powerhouse. But the river is also a threat. St. Denis sits barely above sea level, and flooding is a constant danger. The city has built elaborate systems of levees and drainage to protect itself, but the threat never fully disappears. Every hurricane season brings the possibility of catastrophe, a reminder that nature has not been fully conquered, no matter how modern the city becomes. The swamps that surround St. Denis are another defining feature. Bluewater Marsh to the north is a vast expanse of wetland, home to alligators and snakes and all manner of dangerous wildlife. The swamps have always been a barrier to expansion, limiting the city's growth and creating a sense of isolation despite its connections to the wider world. These swamps also have a darker history. They've served as hiding places for fugitives and outlaws, as dumping grounds for bodies, as sites of secret rituals and forbidden practices. The swamps are where civilization ends and something older and wilder begins. They're a reminder that St. Denis, for all its modernity, exists on the edge of wilderness. The city of contradictions. The city itself is divided into distinct districts, each with its own character and history. Understanding these districts is essential to understanding St. Denis as a whole. The French Quarter. The French Quarter is the heart of Old St. Denis, the original colonial settlement that has grown and evolved over 2 centuries. This is where you'll find the city's most distinctive architecture: wrought iron balconies, narrow streets, buildings that seem to lean toward each other as if sharing secrets. The French Quarter is a place of contrasts. By day, it's a bustling commercial district, full of shops and restaurants and businesses catering to locals and visitors alike. The market square is a riot of colour and noise, with vendors selling everything from fresh produce to exotic imports. The streets are crowded with people of every class and background, rubbing shoulders in a way that would be unthinkable in more segregated cities. By night, the French Quarter transforms. The gas lamps cast pools of golden light on the cobblestones, and the sounds of music drift from the saloons and dance halls. This is when the district's more disreputable establishments come alive. The gambling dens, the brothels, the opium parlours that cater to every vice imaginable. The architecture of the French Quarter tells the story of the city's history. The oldest buildings date from the Spanish colonial period, with their thick walls and interior courtyards designed to cope with the brutal summer heat. Later buildings show French and American influences, creating an architectural palimpsest that rewards careful observation. The Bastille Saloon is one of the most prominent establishments in the French Quarter. It's a place where the city's elite come to drink and gamble, where deals are made and fortunes are won and lost. The saloon features a grand interior with crystal chandeliers, polished wood, and an air of refined decadence that captures the essence of Saint Denis. But the French Quarter also has its darker corners. The back alleys are home to poverty and crime, to people who have fallen through the cracks of the city's prosperity. Beggars huddle in doorways, pickpockets work the crowds, and in the shadows, more dangerous predators wait for the unwary. The Bastille Saloon. The Bastille Saloon is another landmark establishment, a high-end drinking establishment that caters to the city's elite. The interior is elegant, with a long mahogany bar, crystal glassware, and paintings on the walls that depict scenes of European sophistication. The Bastille is where deals are made, where information is exchanged, where the powerful come to see and be seen. The clientele of the Bastille includes businessmen, politicians, and professionals, men who wear fine suits and speak in measured tones about money and power. They drink expensive whiskey and smoke imported cigars, discussing the affairs of the city with the confidence of those who shape events, rather than merely experiencing them. But the Bastille also attracts a more dangerous element. Gamblers work the back rooms, running high-stakes poker games where fortunes change hands. Criminals with enough money and discretion can drink alongside respectable citizens, the shared space creating unlikely connections. The Bastille is a place where the boundaries between legitimate and illegitimate blur. Arthur's visits to the Bastille are exercises in code switching. He has to modulate his behaviour, his speech, his entire presentation to fit in with the sophisticated crowd. It's exhausting and alienating, a reminder of how far he is from this world of wealth and refinement. The Théâtre Râleur. The Théâtre Râleur is one of Saint-Denis' premier entertainment venues, a grand building that hosts performances ranging from opera to vaudeville. The theatre's facade is ornate, with classical columns and elaborate decorations that announce its cultural aspirations. Inside, the auditorium is plush with red velvet seats, gilded balconies, and a magnificent chandelier that sparkles with hundreds of crystals. The performances at the Théâtre Râleur reflect the city's diverse tastes. One night might feature a touring opera company performing Verdi or Puccini. The next might showcase a vaudeville troupe with comedians, singers, and acrobats. The theatre is democratic in its programming, offering something for every taste, though the seating arrangements maintain strict class distinctions. Arthur can attend shows at the theatre, experiencing a side of the life that's completely foreign to his outlaw existence. Sitting in the darkness, watching performers on stage, he's just another member of the audience, anonymous and unremarkable. These moments of normalcy are poignant glimpses of the life Arthur might have had if circumstances had been different. The shows themselves are entertaining and sometimes surprising. The vaudeville acts include comedy routines, magic tricks, and musical performances that range from sentimental ballads to ragtime numbers. The performers are skilled professionals, making their living by entertaining crowds night after night. One particularly memorable act involves a magician who catches bullets in his teeth, a trick that resonates strangely with Arthur, a man whose life is defined by bullets. There is the strong woman who bends iron bars, the escape artist who defies chains, the dancers who kick their legs in perfect unison. These acts are spectacles of the human body, pushing the limits of what is possible, mirroring the city's own push against the limits of nature. For the player, the theatre offers more than just diversion. It offers a commentary on the times. The modern acts, The projected moving images, if available, the brazen nature of some of the comedy, it all speaks to a society that is shedding its Victorian inhibitions and rushing headlong into the 20th century. The audience's reactions, cheering, booing, laughing, make the world feel lived in and responsive. It is one of the few places in St. Denis where the social classes truly mix, united by the universal desire to be entertained, to look away from the smoke and the struggle for a few precious hours. The tailor. The tailor's shop offers similar opportunities for customization in clothing. The St. Denis tailor carries the finest garments available, from formal suits to rugged outdoor wear. The fabrics are high quality, the cuts are fashionable, and the prices reflect the exclusivity of the merchandise. Clothing in St. Denis is a form of communication, signalling status and identity to everyone who sees you. The right outfit can open doors, while the wrong one can close them. Arthur's wardrobe choices affect how NPCs react to him, with formal attire earning respect in upscale establishments and practical clothing fitting better in working-class areas. The tailor can also create custom outfits, combining different pieces to create unique looks. This customization system allows players to express themselves through Arthur's appearance, creating a character who looks the way they want him to look. The gunsmith. The gunsmith's shop in St. Denis is the finest in the region, offering weapons that can't be found elsewhere. The shop is small but well stocked, with rifles, pistols and shotguns displayed on the walls and in glass cases. The gunsmith himself is a craftsman, knowledgeable about his wares and capable of customizing weapons to customer specifications. The weapons available in St. Denis reflect the city's connections to the wider world. European, firearms, military surplus, custom pieces, all can be found here. The prices are high, but the quality is unmatched. For someone like Arthur, who depends on his weapons for survival, the St. Denis gunsmith is an essential resource. The customization options are extensive. Engravings, different metals, improved components, all can be added to transform a standard weapon into something unique. These customizations are expensive but satisfying, allowing players to create weapons that reflect their personal style. The doctor. The doctor's office in St. Denis provides medical services that range from routine care to emergency treatment. The doctor is a trained professional, educated in the medical schools of the East and experienced in treating the diseases and injuries common to urban life. His office is clean and well equipped by the standards of the era. Arthur's visits to the doctor take on special significance after his tuberculosis diagnosis. The doctor can provide tonics and treatments that temporarily alleviate symptoms, though nothing can cure the disease. These visits are reminders of Arthur's mortality, moments when he has to confront the reality of his condition. The doctor also treats other ailments and injuries. Gunshot wounds, broken bones, infections, all can be addressed here. The medical care available in St. Denis is superior to what's available in smaller towns, reflecting the city's resources and sophistication. The waterfront. The waterfront district is where the city's commercial heart beats loudest. The docks stretch along the river, accommodating ships of every size and description. Warehouses line the streets, storing goods from around the world before they're distributed throughout the region. The waterfront is a place of constant activity. Longshoremen load and unload cargo around the clock. Merchants haggle over prices. Sailors from distant ports spend their wages in the nearby taverns and brothels. The air smells of salt and fish and tar, a reminder that St. Denis is fundamentally a port city. dependent on the river for its prosperity. The shipping industry has made St. Denis wealthy, but it's also brought problems. The waterfront is controlled by various factions who compete for the lucrative contracts and kickbacks that flow through the docks. Corruption is endemic, with city officials, police and criminals all taking their cut of the action. The waterfront is also where you'll find some of the city's most desperate poverty. The workers who load and unload the ships are paid poorly and treated worse. They live in cramped tenements near the docks, vulnerable to disease and exploitation. When work is scarce, they have nothing to fall back on. This is the reality behind St. Denis's prosperity. Wealth for the few, built on the labour of the many. The gleaming ships and bustling warehouses represent progress, but progress for whom? The waterfront asks this question with every load of cargo, every exhausted worker, every coin that changes hands. The post office. The post office handles the mail that connects St. Denis to the rest of the country. Letters and packages arrive daily, carrying news from distant places and maintaining the connections that bind families and businesses together. The post office is a hub of communication, a place where information flows in and out of the city. Arthur can use the post office to send and receive mail, maintaining connections with people he's met throughout his journey. The mail system is a reminder that the world extends beyond what Arthur can see, that his actions have consequences that ripple outward through networks of relationship and obligation. The train station. The train station is a gateway to the wider world, connecting St. Denis to destinations throughout the country. Trains arrive and depart on regular schedules, carrying passengers and freight. The station is always busy, with travellers coming and going, porters handling luggage, and vendors selling food and newspapers. The architecture of the station is impressive, with high ceilings, iron columns, and large windows that flood the space with light. This station is designed to impress, to announce that St. Denis is a major city worthy of respect. The scale and grandeur of the building reflect the importance of rail transportation to the city's economy. Arthur can use the trains to travel quickly between locations, a convenience that reflects the modern transportation network that's transforming America. The train rides offer opportunities for observation and reflection as Arthur watches the landscape pass by outside the window. The Industrial District. The Industrial District represents the future that's coming to America, whether it wants it or not. Here you'll find the factories and mills that are transforming the economy, belching smoke into the sky as they churn out the products of the new industrial age. The Ansberg Mining Company has offices here, coordinating the extraction of coal and other resources from the mines to the north. Other companies process cotton, manufacture textiles, produce the countless goods that modern life requires. The industrial district never sleeps, its furnaces burning day and night. The workers in these factories labour under brutal conditions. The hours are long, the pay is poor, and safety is an afterthought. Industrial accidents are common, leaving workers maimed or dead. Those who complain are fired and blacklisted. Those who try to organise are met with violence. This is the dark side of progress, the human cost of industrialisation that the boosters and businessmen prefer not to discuss. The factories that make St. Denis wealthy also make it sick, poisoning the air and water, grinding down the workers who keep them running. The industrial district is also where you'll find some of the city's most stark inequality. The factory owners live in mansions on the hill, while Their workers crowd into tenements in the shadow of the smokestacks. The contrast is jarring, a visual representation of the class divisions that define American society at the turn of the century. The Garden District. The Garden District is where the city's elite have built their mansions, away from the noise and pollution of the commercial and industrial areas. This is old money and new money alike, families who have been prominent for generations alongside entrepreneurs who have recently made their fortunes. The mansions of the Garden District are architectural showpieces designed to display the wealth and taste of their owners. Greek Revival columns, Gothic turrets, Italianate facades. The styles vary, but the message is the same. The people who live here have arrived, and they want everyone to know it. The gardens that give the district its name are equally impressive. Manicured lawns, exotic plants, fountains and statuary, all maintained by armies of servants. These gardens are private paradises, walled off from the chaos of the city, offering their owners a taste of the pastoral life even in the heart of the metropolis. But the Garden District is not as peaceful as it appears. Behind the elegant facades, the wealthy families of St. Denis engage in their own forms of warfare. Social climbing, business rivalries, political manoeuvring. The parties and balls that fill the social calendar are battlegrounds where reputations are made and destroyed, where alliances are formed and broken. The mayor's mansion is located in the Garden District, a symbol of the intertwining of political and economic power in St. Denis. The mayor is not just a political figure but a social one, expected to host events and maintain relationships with the city's leading families. Politics in St. Denis is personal, conducted in drawing rooms and private clubs as much as in City Hall. The slums. The slums of St. Denis are where the city's failures are most visible. Here, in the shadow of the factories and the mansions, live the people who've been left behind by progress. The poor, the sick, the desperate, the forgotten. The housing in the slums is barely worthy of the name. Ramshackle buildings crowd together, their walls thin, their roofs leaking, their foundations rotting in the damp soil. Families crowd into single rooms, sharing space with rats and roaches. Sanitation is primitive, disease is rampant, and death is a constant companion. The people of the slums come from every background. Former slaves and their descendants, immigrants from Europe and Asia, rural migrants seeking opportunity in the city, all have ended up here when their dreams fail to materialize. They work when they can find work, beg when they can't, and struggle to survive in a city that has no place for them. Crime flourishes in the slums, not because the people are inherently criminal, but because crime is often the only option available. Theft, prostitution, drug dealing. These are survival strategies for people who have been denied legitimate opportunities. The police rarely venture into the slums except to collect bribes or crack heads. The slums are also where you'll find some of the city's most vibrant culture. The music that would later be called jazz is being born here, in the dance halls and street corners, where musicians experiment with new sounds. The food, the art, the language of the slums all reflect the creativity of people making something from nothing. This is the paradox of the slums. They're places of suffering and deprivation, but also places of resilience and creativity. The people who live here have been failed by society, but they haven't given up. They're building their own communities, their own cultures, their own ways of surviving in a hostile world. The beggars. The beggars of St. Denis represent the city's failures. People who have fallen through the cracks of the urban economy. They huddle in doorways asking passers-by for coins. Some are disabled, unable to work. Some are addicted, their lives consumed by alcohol or opium. Some are simply unlucky, victims of circumstances beyond their control. Arthur can give money to beggars, small acts of charity that affect his honour rating. These interactions are reminders of the inequality that defines St. Denis, the vast gap between those who have and those who have not. The beggars are invisible to most city dwellers, but Arthur sees them, acknowledges them, responds to their humanity. Seku, life in St. Denis. Walk the streets of St. Denis and you'll hear a dozen languages, see faces from every continent, witness the collision of cultures that makes this city unique. The French Creole families who trace their ancestry to the original colonists still hold considerable influence, maintaining their traditions and their social networks even as the city changes around them. They speak French at home, attend the Catholic Church, and look down on the newcomers who don't understand the old ways. The Anglo-American population has grown steadily since the city became part of the United States. These are the businessmen and professionals who have come to St. Denis seeking opportunity, bringing their Protestant work ethic and their ambition. They've built many of the city's new industries and institutions, but they've never fully been accepted by the old Creole elite. The African-American population of St. Denis is substantial and complex. Some families have been free for generations, building businesses and communities long before emancipation. Others are former slaves, still finding their footing in a society that offers freedom in name but discrimination in practice. The black community of St. Denis has its own churches, its own businesses, its own social hierarchies. Immigrants from around the world have made St. Denis their home. Italians, Irish, Germans, Chinese, all have established communities in the city, bringing their languages and customs and cuisines. These immigrant communities often face discrimination and exploitation, but they also bring energy and diversity that enrich the city's culture. The interactions between these groups are complex and often tense. Racial segregation is enforced by law and custom, limiting where people can live, work and socialise. But St. Denis is also more fluid than many American cities, with a tradition of racial mixing that dates back to the colonial period. The city's famous quadroon balls and plaquage system created a mixed-race population that doesn't fit neatly into American racial categories. This diversity is both a strength and a source of conflict. St. Denis is a place where different cultures meet and mingle, creating something new and vibrant. But it's also a place where those cultures clash, where competition for resources and status leads to violence and discrimination. The city's diversity is a microcosm of America's struggles with race and immigration, played out on the streets and in the institutions of this remarkable place. Follow the money and you'll understand St. Denis. Every transaction, every deal, every exchange of goods flows through networks of commerce that have made this city wealthy and powerful. Understanding these networks is essential to understanding who really controls things. The port is the foundation of the economy. Ships arrive daily from the Caribbean, from Europe, from ports up and down the American coast. They bring manufactured goods, luxury items, immigrants seeking new lives. They leave loaded with cotton, sugar, timber, and other products of the region. The shipping industry employs thousands and generates enormous wealth. Cotton is king in the region around St. Denis. The plantations that surround the city produce vast quantities of the fibre, which is processed in the city's mills and shipped to textile factories around the world. The cotton trade has made fortunes for the planters and merchants who control it, but it's built on a history of slavery and continues to depend on exploited labour. The financial sector has grown alongside the commercial economy. Banks, insurance companies and investment firms have established themselves in St. Denis, providing the capital that fuels growth. The city's bankers are among its most powerful citizens, their decisions affecting the lives of thousands who will never meet them. Manufacturing is the newest sector of the economy and the one growing fastest. The factories of the industrial district produce textiles, machinery, processed foods, and countless other products. Manufacturing promises to transform St. Denis from a commercial hub into an industrial powerhouse, but it also brings new problems: pollution, labour unrest, and the disruption of traditional ways of life. The informal economy is also significant, though it doesn't appear in official statistics. Gambling, prostitution, drug dealing, theft all generate substantial income for those involved. This underground economy is intertwined with the legitimate economy in ways that are often invisible, but always important. The distribution of wealth in St. Denis is profoundly unequal. A small elite controls most of the city's resources, living in luxury while the majority struggle to survive. This inequality is not accidental. It's the result of deliberate policies and practices that concentrate wealth in the hands of the few. The economy of St. Denis works very well for some people and very poorly for others. The political system of St. Denis reflects the city's complexity and its corruption. On paper, the city is governed by a mayor and city council, elected by the citizens and accountable to them. In practice, power is concentrated in the hands of a small elite who manipulate the system for their own benefit. The mayor of Saint-Denis in 1899 is Henri Lemieux, a figure who embodies the city's contradictions. He presents himself as a reformer, promising to clean up corruption and improve services for ordinary citizens. But he's also deeply enmeshed in the city's power structure, dependent on the support of the wealthy families and business interests who really run things. The city council is a collection of ward bosses and machine politicians, each representing a particular neighbourhood or interest group. They trade votes and favours, building coalitions that serve their constituents and themselves. Corruption is endemic, with contracts and jobs distributed based on political loyalty rather than merit. The police force is an instrument of this political machine. Officers are hired and promoted based on their connections, not their qualifications. They enforce the law selectively, protecting the interests of the powerful while harassing the powerless. Bribes are routine, and officers who refuse to participate find themselves transferred to undesirable assignments or forced out entirely. The courts are similarly compromised. Judges are elected, which means they depend on the same political machine that controls everything else. Justice in St. Denis depends heavily on who you know and how much you can pay. The wealthy can escape consequences for almost any crime, while the poor are punished harshly for minor offences. This system is not unique to St. Denis. It's how most American cities operate in this era. But St. Denis is particularly brazen about it, perhaps because the city's diversity and complexity make it harder to maintain the pretense of democratic governance. Everyone knows the system is rigged. The only question is how to work within it. The Van der Linde gang's interactions with St. Denis politics reveal how the system works. They find themselves caught between various factions, manipulated by people who see them as useful tools. The gang thinks they're playing the city, but the city is playing them. Mayor Henri Lemieux. Mayor Henri Lemieux is the political leader of Saint-Denis, a man who embodies the city's contradictions. He presents himself as a reformer, promising to clean up corruption and improve services for ordinary citizens. His speeches are eloquent, his manner is charming, and his intentions seem genuine. But Lemieux is also a creature of the political machine, dependent on the support of the wealthy interests who really control the city. His reforms are limited by what his backers will tolerate. His promises are constrained by the realities of power. Lemieux is not a villain, but he's not a hero either. He's a politician, navigating the compromises that political life requires. Arthur's encounter with Lemieux at the mayor's party reveals the man behind the public image. Lemieux is gracious and welcoming, treating Arthur and Dutch as honoured guests despite their obvious unsuitability for high society. But there's calculation behind the graciousness, an awareness that these rough men might be useful for purposes that respectable people can't acknowledge. The law enforcement in St. Denis is a complex web of official authority and unofficial arrangements. Understanding how the law works in the city is essential to understanding how power operates. The St. Denis Police Department is the primary law enforcement agency. Its officers patrol the streets, respond to crimes, and maintain order. The department is large by the standards of the time, reflecting the city's size and the challenges of urban policing. But the police are deeply compromised. Officers are hired through political connections rather than merit. Promotions depend on loyalty to the machine rather than competence. Corruption is endemic, with officers taking bribes from criminals, businesses, and ordinary citizens seeking favourable treatment. The relationship between the police and organised crime is particularly problematic. Crime bosses like Angelo Bronte have officers on their payroll, ensuring that their operations are protected from interference. The police know who the criminals are but look the other way in exchange for regular payments. This corruption extends to the highest levels. The police chief answers to the mayor, who answers to the political machine, which answers to the wealthy interests that really control the city. Law enforcement is a tool of power, used to protect the privileged and control the powerless. The Pinkertons represent a different kind of law enforcement. This private detective agency has been hired to pursue the Van der Linde gang, and their presence in St. Denis adds another layer of danger for Arthur and his companions. The Pinkertons are relentless and well-resourced, a reminder that the gang's crimes have attracted attention at the highest levels. The relationship between the Pinkertons and the local police is complicated. The Pinkertons have authority that transcends local jurisdictions, but they also need local cooperation to operate effectively. The two agencies sometimes work together and sometimes work at cross purposes, creating opportunities and dangers for those they pursue. The courts complete the picture of St. Denis justice. Judges are elected, which means they're part of the political machine. Trials are often formalities, with outcomes determined before the proceedings begin. The wealthy can buy acquittals. The poor are convicted regardless of evidence. This system of justice is not just. It's a mechanism for maintaining the existing order. It protects property and privilege while punishing those who threaten them. The law in St. Denis is not blind. It sees very clearly who has power and who doesn't. The health and sanitation of St. Denis present enormous challenges. The city's size, density and climate create conditions that promote disease, and make public health difficult to maintain. Yellow fever is the most feared disease in St. Denis. Epidemics sweep through the city periodically, killing thousands and sending those who can afford it fleeing to healthier locations. The disease is spread by mosquitoes, though this isn't fully understood in 1899. The swamps that surround the city are breeding grounds for the insects that carry death. Cholera, typhoid, and other waterborne diseases are also common. The city's water supply is contaminated by sewage and industrial waste. The poor, who can't afford clean water, suffer disproportionately. Epidemics of these diseases are regular occurrences, accepted as facts of urban life. Tuberculosis, the disease that kills Arthur Morgan, is endemic in St. Denis. The crowded conditions, poor ventilation, and widespread poverty create ideal conditions for the disease to spread. Tuberculosis is a slow killer, wasting its victims over months or years. It's the disease of the urban poor, though it strikes all classes. The city has made some efforts to address public health. A board of health monitors conditions and responds to epidemics. Quarantine measures are imposed when necessary. But these efforts are inadequate to the scale of the problem, and political considerations often override public health concerns. The hospitals of St. Denis range from excellent to appalling. The wealthy can access the best medical care available, with skilled physicians and modern facilities. The poor are relegated to charity hospitals where conditions are grim and outcomes are poor. Medical care, like everything else in St. Denis, depends on ability to pay. The water system brings clean water to much of the city through a network of pipes and pumps. This system is a major public health achievement, reducing the incidence of waterborne diseases that once killed thousands. But the system doesn't reach everywhere, and the poor often lack access to clean water. The sewer system carries waste away from the city, another public health achievement. The sewers are an engineering marvel, a network of tunnels and pipes that handle the waste of 80,000 people. But the system is imperfect, and flooding can overwhelm it, spreading contamination through the streets. The education system of St. Denis reflects the city's complexity and its inequalities. Schools serve different populations in different ways, preparing young people for very different futures. The public schools serve the children of the working and middle classes. These schools provide basic education in reading, writing, and arithmetic, preparing students for lives as workers and citizens. The quality varies widely, with schools in wealthy neighborhoods receiving more resources than those in poor areas. The Catholic schools serve a large portion of the population, particularly the Creole and immigrant communities. These schools combine religious instruction with academic education, maintaining the Church's influence over the next generation. The Catholic schools are often better resourced than the public schools, thanks to church support. The private academies serve the children of the elite. These schools provide classical education, preparing students for university and professional careers. The academies are exclusive, admitting only those who can pay the fees and meet the social requirements. They're training grounds for the next generation of leaders. The education of African Americans is severely limited. Segregation restricts black children to inferior schools with inadequate resources. Many black children receive no formal education at all, their labor needed to support their families. The educational inequality reinforces the racial hierarchy, limiting opportunities for advancement. Higher education is available in St. Denis, with several colleges and professional schools. These institutions train doctors, lawyers, and other professionals, providing the expertise that a modern city requires. But access to higher education is limited to those who can afford it and who meet the racial and social requirements. The education system perpetuates inequality, even as it provides opportunity. Those born into privilege receive the education that prepares them for continued privilege. Those born into poverty receive education that prepares them for continued poverty. The schools of St. Denis are sorting mechanisms, channeling young people into the roles that society has assigned them. The role of women in St. Denis society is constrained by the expectations of the era, but women find ways to exercise agency within and around those constraints. Upper-class women are expected to be ornaments and managers of households. They oversee servants, organise social events, and maintain the family's reputation. Their education prepares them for these roles, emphasising accomplishments like music and languages rather than practical skills. But upper-class women also wield considerable informal power. They control access to social networks that are essential for business and political success. They influence their husbands and sons. They shape the culture through their patronage of arts and charities. The power of upper-class women is real, even if it's exercised behind the scenes. Working-class women have fewer options and more burdens. They work in factories, in domestic service, in shops and offices. They raise children while also earning wages. Their lives are hard, with little time or energy for anything beyond survival. Some women find opportunities in the margins of respectable society. The madams who run brothels are businesswomen, managing complex enterprises and accumulating wealth. The fortune tellers and spiritualists who serve the city's appetite for the occult are often women, using claims of supernatural power to carve out independent lives. The women's suffrage movement has a presence in St. Denis, though it's small and faces considerable opposition. Activists argue for women's right to vote and for broader equality. They're dismissed as radicals by most of society, but they're planting seeds that will eventually bear fruit. The game features several notable women in St. Denis. The Fence, for example, is a woman running an illegal business in a male-dominated underworld. Her presence is a reminder that women have always found ways to operate outside the roles society assigns them. The women of the night. The prostitutes of St. Denis work the streets and the brothels, selling their bodies to survive. They're victims of an economy that offers few options to women without resources or connections. Some have chosen this life, others have been forced into it. All face dangers that respectable society prefers not to acknowledge. The game doesn't romanticize prostitution or condemn it. It simply shows it as part of the urban landscape, one of the ways that people survive in a harsh world. The prostitutes are characters with their own stories, their own struggles, their own humanity. 3. Culture and spirit. Step into a St. Denis saloon on any given night, and you'll understand why this city has a reputation unlike any other in America. The music, the food, the celebration, the sheer appetite for life, all of it sets St. Denis apart from more puritanical cities. This culture has deep roots in the city's history and continues to evolve in fascinating ways. Music is everywhere in St. Denis. The sounds of ragtime piano drift from the saloons. Street musicians play for coins on every corner. The dance halls feature bands that are experimenting with new styles, blending African rhythms with European harmonies to create something unprecedented. This is the birthplace of jazz, though the word hasn't been invented yet. The music of St. Denis reflects the city's diversity. African American musicians bring traditions that stretch back to Africa. filtered through the experience of slavery and freedom. European immigrants bring their own musical heritage. Creole musicians blend these influences with French and Spanish traditions. The result is a musical culture of extraordinary richness and creativity. A taste of the city food is equally important to Saint Denis culture. The cuisine blends French, Spanish, African, and Native American influences into something unique. Gumbo, jambalaya, crawfish etouffee, beignets, these dishes are expressions of the city's history and identity. Eating well is not a luxury in Saint Denis, it's a way of life. The food culture of Saint Denis deserves special attention, as it's one of the most distinctive aspects of the city's character. The cuisine reflects the blending of cultures that define Saint Denis, combining French, Spanish, African, and Native American influences into something unique. Gumbo is perhaps the signature dish of Saint Denis cuisine. This hearty stew combines meat or seafood with vegetables in a rich, flavourful broth thickened with okra or filet powder. The dish has African roots, adapted and elaborated over generations to become a symbol of the city's culinary identity. Jambalaya is another iconic dish, a rice-based preparation that shows Spanish influence. The dish combines rice with meat, seafood and vegetables, seasoned with spices that give it a distinctive flavour. Jambalaya is comfort food, filling and satisfying, the kind of dish that sustains workers through long days. Crawfish are a local delicacy, harvested from the bayous and prepared in countless ways. Crawfish boils are social events, bringing people together to share food and conversation. The tiny crustaceans are labour-intensive to eat, but the flavour rewards the effort. Beignets are the quintessential Saint Denis pastry, squares of fried dough covered in powdered sugar. They're served hot, best enjoyed with coffee at one of the city's many cafes. Beignets are simple but perfect, a small pleasure that captures the city's approach to life. The coffee culture of Saint Denis is distinctive. The city has a tradition of strong, dark coffee, often served with chicory that adds a slightly bitter flavour. Coffee is a social ritual, an excuse to sit and talk and watch the world go by. The cafes of Saint Denis are gathering places where the city's business is conducted over cups of the dark brew. The restaurants of Saint Denis range from elegant establishments serving haute cuisine to humble joints dishing out home cooking. The finest restaurants offer French-influenced menus with local ingredients, creating dishes that would be at home in Paris. The humbler places serve the food that ordinary people eat, simple but flavourful preparations that sustain the working class. The market is the heart of the city's food culture. Vendors sell fresh produce, seafood, meat and prepared foods. The market is a sensory experience, with the colours of fruits and vegetables, the smells of cooking food, the sounds of vendors calling their wares. Shopping at the market is a daily ritual for many Saint Denis residents. The General Store. The general store in Saint Denis is larger and better stocked than stores elsewhere. The shelves are filled with goods from around the world, canned foods, dry goods, tools, and countless other items. The store serves the needs of a diverse urban population, offering products that cater to different tastes and budgets. Shopping in the general store is an experience in itself. The variety of goods reflects the complexity of urban life, the countless needs that city dwellers have, and the market that has emerged to serve them. The store is a microcosm of the consumer economy that's transforming American life. Street vendors. The street vendors of St. Denis are anonymous but essential characters, providing the goods and services that keep the city running. The newspaper boys hawk the latest editions, shouting headlines to attract customers. The food vendors sell hot meals to workers who don't have time to sit down. The flower sellers offer beauty to those who can afford it. These vendors are the working class of St. Denis. People who labour long hours for small rewards. They're invisible to the wealthy, who pass them without a glance. But they're the foundation of the urban economy, the countless small transactions that add up to the city's commercial life. Arthur's interactions with vendors are brief but revealing. A newspaper purchase provides information about the wider world. A meal from a street vendor satisfies hunger. These small transactions connect Arthur to the ordinary life of the city, the daily routines that continue regardless of the dramas playing out in the background. Carnival is the ultimate expression of St. Denis culture. Once a year, the city erupts in celebration, with parades and parties and masked balls that last for days. Social hierarchies are temporarily suspended as people of all backgrounds dance in the streets. Carnival is a release valve for the tensions that build up throughout the year, a sanctioned period of excess before the austerity of Lent. But Carnival also reveals the darker aspects of St. Denis culture. The celebration can turn violent, with old grudges settled under cover of the chaos. The masks that allow freedom also allow anonymity, enabling behaviour that would be unacceptable at other times. Carnival is liberation and danger, joy and menace, all mixed together. Religion and belief. Religion plays a complex role in St. Denis society. The Catholic Church has been present since the city's founding, and it remains a powerful institution. The cathedral dominates the skyline, a physical reminder of the church's importance. Catholic traditions shape the rhythm of life, from the weekly mass to the annual cycle of feast days and fasts. But Catholicism in St. Denis has always been somewhat different from Catholicism elsewhere. The church has had to accommodate the city's diversity, tolerating practices that would be condemned in more orthodox settings. The veneration of saints sometimes blends with African spiritual traditions. The boundaries between Catholic and other beliefs are more porous here than in most places. Voodoo is the most famous of these other beliefs, though it's often misunderstood. Voodoo in St. Denis is a syncretic religion, blending African spiritual practices with Catholic elements. It has its own priests and priestesses, its own rituals and ceremonies, its own understanding of the spiritual world. Voodoo is practiced openly in some parts of the city and secretly in others. The relationship between Catholicism and voodoo is complicated. The church officially condemns voodoo as superstition or worse, but many Catholics also participate in voodoo practices. The two traditions have influenced each other over centuries, creating a religious landscape that defies easy categorization. Protestant churches have established themselves in St. Denis as well, serving the Anglo-American population and some immigrant communities. These churches tend to be more austere than the Catholic tradition, emphasizing personal morality and hard work. The tension between Catholic and Protestant approaches to life is another fault line in the city's complex social geography. The cathedral. The cathedral is the most prominent religious building in the city, its spires visible from miles away. It's built in the Gothic Revival style, with pointed arches and flying buttresses that evoke the great cathedrals of medieval Europe. The cathedral represents the church's claim to timeless authority, its connection to traditions that stretch back centuries. Inside, the cathedral is a space of hushed reverence. Stained glass windows filter the light into coloured patterns on the stone floor. The altar gleams with gold and silver. The faithful come to pray, to confess, to seek comfort in a world that offers little. The cathedral is a refuge from the chaos of the city, a place where the eternal seems more real than the temporal. Voodoo and the occult voodoo is the most famous of these other beliefs, though it's often misunderstood. Voodoo in St. Denis is a syncretic religion, blending African spiritual practices with Catholic elements. It has its own priests and priestesses, its own rituals and ceremonies, its own understanding of the spiritual world. Voodoo is practiced openly in some parts of the city and secretly in others. The relationship between Catholicism and voodoo is complicated. The Church officially condemns voodoo as superstition or worse, but many Catholics also participate in voodoo practices. The two traditions have influenced each other over centuries, creating a religious landscape that defies easy categorization. Voodoo is the most famous of these spiritual traditions. Rooted in African religious practices and blended with Catholic elements, voodoo is a living tradition in St. Denis. Practitioners believe in a spirit world that interacts with the physical world, in the power of rituals and objects to influence events. The voodoo practitioners of St. Denis include priestesses who serve their communities, providing spiritual guidance, healing, and protection. These women are respected figures, their knowledge passed down through generations. They operate in a grey area between acceptance and persecution, tolerated by authorities who don't fully understand what they do. The rituals of voodoo include ceremonies that invoke the spirits, the creation of protective charms and talismans, and practices that outsiders often misunderstand or fear. The religion has been sensationalized and demonized by those who don't understand it, but for practitioners it's a source of meaning and power in a world that often denies them both. The game includes encounters with voodoo practitioners and references to voodoo beliefs. These encounters are handled with relative respect, presenting voodoo as a legitimate spiritual tradition rather than mere superstition. The supernatural elements of the game, including the strange occurrences around St. Denis, can be interpreted through a voodoo lens. Death and memory. The presence of death in St. Denis is constant and unavoidable. The city's cemeteries, its diseases, its violence, all remind residents that life is fragile and death is near. The cemeteries of St. Denis are distinctive. Because the water table is so high, bodies cannot be buried underground. Instead, they're interred in above-ground tombs, creating cities of the dead that mirror the cities of the living. The cemeteries are beautiful and eerie, with elaborate monuments and quiet paths. The wealthy build grand tombs for their families, monuments that will endure for generations. These tombs are statements of status, announcing that the family matters, that their dead deserve to be remembered. The architecture of the tombs reflects the taste of the era, from classical to Gothic to Egyptian revival. The poor are buried in simpler graves, often unmarked. Their deaths are recorded in parish registers but leave little physical trace. The inequality of life continues into death, with the wealthy commanding attention even in the grave while the poor are forgotten. The cemeteries of St. Denis tell their own story. The elaborate tombs of the wealthy stand in contrast to the unmarked graves of the poor. The cemeteries are above ground, necessary because the high water table makes traditional burial impossible. They're cities of the dead, mirroring the inequalities of the city of the living. The rituals of death in St. Denis blend Catholic tradition with African and Creole customs. Funerals are elaborate affairs with processions through the streets, music, and gatherings that celebrate the life of the deceased. Death is not hidden away but acknowledged as part of the community's experience. The jazz funeral is perhaps the most distinctive tradition. A brass band leads the procession, playing mournful music on the way to the cemetery and joyful music on the way back. The transition from sorrow to celebration reflects a philosophy of death that embraces both grief and release. The presence of death shapes the culture of Saint Denis. The city's famous hedonism, its embrace of pleasure and excess, can be understood as a response to the constant presence of mortality. If death can come at any time, why not enjoy life while you can? The city's motto might as well be, "Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die." Mysteries of the night. The mysteries and secrets of St. Denis add layers of intrigue to the city's already complex character. The game hints at hidden depths, at stories that are never fully told, at darkness lurking beneath the surface. The vampire of St. Denis is one of the most famous mysteries. Clues scattered throughout the city point to the existence of a creature that feeds on human blood. Following these clues leads to an encounter that raises more questions than it answers. Is the vampire real, or is it a madman who believes himself to be a vampire? The game leaves the question open. The serial killer who stalks the area around St. Denis is another dark mystery. Bodies are found with cryptic messages, leading to a confrontation with the murderer whose motives are obscure. This storyline touches on the darker aspects of human nature, the capacity for evil that exists alongside the capacity for good. The ghost train that appears at certain times and places is a reminder that the world of Red Dead Redemption 2 contains elements that can't be explained by rational means. The train appears and disappears, leaving witnesses to wonder what they've seen. It's a memento mori, a reminder of death in mechanical form. The night folk who haunt the swamps around St. Denis are perhaps the most terrifying mystery. These silent, deadly figures attack without warning, using primitive weapons and seemingly supernatural stealth. Are they a cult? A tribe? Something else entirely? The game provides few answers. These mysteries serve several purposes in the game. They add variety and surprise to the experience. They create a sense that the world is larger and stranger than it appears. They remind players that not everything can be understood or controlled. The mysteries of St. Denis are part of what makes the city feel alive. The ghost stories of St. Denis are numerous and varied. The city's long history has left behind countless tales of hauntings and apparitions. Old buildings are said to be inhabited by the spirits of former residents. Certain locations are avoided after dark because of the things that have been seen there. The vampire of St. Denis is the most famous supernatural legend. Clues scattered throughout the city point to the existence of a creature that feeds on human blood. The investigation leads to an encounter that raises more questions than it answers, leaving players to decide for themselves what they've witnessed. The night folk who haunt the swamps around St. Denis are perhaps the most terrifying supernatural element. These silent, deadly figures attack without warning, using primitive weapons and seemingly supernatural stealth. Whether they're human or something else is never made clear, adding to their menace. Z4. The criminal underworld. While politicians posture in City Hall and businessmen negotiate in boardrooms, the real power in St. Denis often flows through darker channels. Various gangs and criminal organizations control different territories and rackets, competing and cooperating in a complex dance of violence and negotiation. Other criminal organisations operate in St. Denis as well. Street gangs control various neighbourhoods, fighting over territory and respect. Fences buy and sell stolen goods. Counterfeiters produce fake currency. The criminal ecosystem is diverse and competitive, with new players constantly emerging to challenge the established order. The line between legitimate and criminal business is often blurry in St. Denis. Many respectable businessmen have connections to the underworld, using criminal methods to eliminate competitors or enforce contracts. Many criminals aspire to respectability, investing their ill-gotten gains in legitimate enterprises. The city's economy is a seamless web of legal and illegal activity. The Fence. The Fence in St. Denis operates from a nondescript building that gives no hint of the illegal business conducted within. The Fence buys stolen goods, no questions asked, converting the proceeds of crime into cash. This service is essential for outlaws like Arthur, who accumulate valuable items through their activities, but can't sell them through legitimate channels. The St. Denis Fence is more sophisticated than her counterparts in smaller towns. She deals in higher value items and has connections that allow her to move merchandise that others couldn't handle. Her prices are fair and her discretion is absolute. She's a professional in an illegal profession. The Fence also sells items that can't be obtained elsewhere, including recipes for special ammunition and other useful goods. Her inventory reflects her connections to the criminal underworld, offering products that serve the needs of those who operate outside the law. Angelo Bronte, the King of St. Denis. The most prominent criminal figure in St. Denis is Angelo Bronte, an Italian immigrant who has built a criminal empire through intelligence, ruthlessness, and strategic alliances. Bronte controls much of the city's illegal gambling, prostitution, and protection rackets. He has connections to the political machine, the police, and legitimate businesses, making him nearly untouchable. Bronte's organisation is sophisticated, more like a corporation than a traditional gang. He has lieutenants who manage different operations, accountants who track the money, lawyers who handle legal problems. He cultivates an image of respectability, attending social events and donating to charities, while his underlings do the dirty work. The fall of the Van der Linde gang. The Van der Linde gang's arrival in St. Denis marks a turning point in their story. They come to the city seeking opportunity, hoping to score big and finally escape the law that's been pursuing them. What they find instead is a world that's far more complex and dangerous than anything they've encountered before. The gang's first impressions of St. Denis are mixed. Some members are excited by the city's energy and possibilities. Others are overwhelmed by the noise and crowds. Dutch sees the city as a challenge to be conquered, another frontier where his charisma and cunning can prevail. Arthur is more skeptical, sensing that the rules here are different from the rules of the wilderness. The gang's initial forays into St. Denis are tentative. They explore the city, learning its geography and its rhythms. They make contacts, seeking opportunities for profit. They try to blend in, though a group of rough outlaws stands out in the sophisticated urban environment. First impressions. The trolley robbery is one of the gang's first major operations in St. Denis, and it sets the tone for what's to come. The job goes wrong, as jobs increasingly do for the Van der Linde gang. The city proves to be a more difficult environment for their usual tactics. The police are more numerous and better organised. The witnesses are everywhere. The escape routes are limited. This robbery also brings the gang to the attention of Angelo Bronte, who has Jack Marston after the boy wanders off during the chaos. The gang's desperate search for Jack leads them into Bronte's orbit, beginning a relationship that will have profound consequences. The trolley station robbery is one of the gang's first major operations in St. Denis, and it establishes the pattern that will define their time in the city. The plan seems solid: rob the trolley station, grab the take, and escape before the police can respond. But nothing goes according to plan. The robbery itself is chaotic. The guards resist more than expected. Civilians panic and get in the way. The police respond faster than anticipated. What should have been a quick job becomes a running battle through the streets of St. Denis. The escape is even worse. The gang splits up, trying to lose their pursuers in the maze of city streets. Arthur finds himself alone, hunted, desperate. The urban environment that seemed so full of opportunity now feels like a trap, with enemies around every corner. This robbery teaches the gang that St. Denis is different from the frontier towns they're used to robbing. The police are more numerous and better organised. The witnesses are everywhere. The escape routes are limited. The tactics that work in the wilderness don't work in the city. The search for Jack. The search for Jack Marston after he goes missing during the trolley robbery is one of the most tense sequences in the game. Jack is just a boy, lost in a dangerous city, and the gang is desperate to find him. They search the streets, question witnesses, follow leads that go nowhere. The search reveals the gang's capacity for love and loyalty. These are hardened criminals, killers and thieves, but they're also a family. Jack is one of their own, and they'll do anything to get him back. The search humanizes characters who might otherwise seem purely villainous. However, the search also highlights the gang's impotence in this new environment. In the wilderness, they could track hoofprints, read the land, use force to get answers. In St. Denis, those skills are useless. The stone streets leave no tracks. The crowds offer no silence to listen to. They're forced to rely on asking questions, on navigating bureaucracy and social networks they don't understand. It is a terrifying realization for men like Dutch and Arthur. Their power does not translate here. They are not predators in this jungle. They are tourists, lost and vulnerable. The contrast between the sunny, bustling streets and the dark panic of the search creates a dissonant atmosphere. The city goes on. Trolleys clang, children play, couples stroll, while the gang's world is falling apart. This indifference of the city is a hallmark of the urban experience. Your personal tragedy is invisible to the thousands of strangers around you. This isolation amidst a crowd is a thoroughly modern horror, one that the gang is experiencing for the first time. The discovery that Angelo Bronte has Jack changes everything. Suddenly, the gang is in debt to a man they don't know, obligated to someone whose motives are unclear. The power dynamic has shifted, and the gang is no longer in control of their own fate. Deal with the devil. The meeting with Angelo Bronte is a masterclass in manipulation. Bronte presents himself as a reasonable man, a businessman who can help the gang achieve their goals. He returns Jack unharmed, asking only for a small favour in return. Dutch is charmed, seeing in Bronte a kindred spirit, someone who operates outside the law but with style and intelligence. But Bronte is playing a longer game. He sees the Van der Linde gang as useful tools, capable of violence that he'd prefer not to be connected to directly. He feeds them information and opportunities, drawing them deeper into his web. Each job they do for Bronte makes them more dependent on him and more vulnerable to betrayal. The Gilded Cage, Mayor's Party, the party at Mayor Lemieux's mansion, serves as both the narrative climax of the chapter's social commentary and the moment the trap snaps shut. It is a fish-out-of-water sequence that highlights just how far the gang is from the world of legitimate power. Ostensibly invited as a gesture of friendship, Dutch and Arthur are actually being paraded as curiosities, useful idiots in Bronte's complex political games. Bronte himself represents a new kind of antagonist for Dutch. Unlike Cornwall, who is raw determination and capital, or the Pinkertons, who are the blunt instrument of the law, Bronte is a creature of pure nuance. He understands what Dutch refuses to admit, that civilization is just a more sophisticated form of savagery. Bronte doesn't fight the system, he is the system. He buys judges, owns policemen, and hosts the mayor. When Dutch preaches about the freedom of the outlaw, Bronte laughs not because he disagrees, but because he finds the concept quaint. To Bronte, power is the only reality, and anyone who pretends otherwise, like Dutch, is a child playing with guns. This philosophical conflict drives their rivalry as much as the kidnapping of Jack. Dutch hates Bronte because Bronte sees through him, recognizing the would-be saviour of the people as just another petty warlord who hasn't realised his time is up. The party itself is a spectacle of wealth and privilege. The mansion is opulent, filled with expensive furnishings and artwork. The guests are the cream of St. Denis society, dressed in the latest fashions and discussing the issues of the day. The food and drink are the finest available, served by an army of servants. Dutch tries to work the room, deploying his considerable charm to make connections and gather information. He's partially successful, engaging guests in conversation and learning about the city's power structure. But he's also clearly uncomfortable, aware that these people see through his pretensions. Arthur is even more out of place. He lacks Dutch's social skills and has no interest in pretending to be something he's not. He observes the party with a mixture of fascination and contempt, seeing the corruption beneath the civilized surface. The party ends badly, with the gang's cover blown and their plans disrupted. But it's also a valuable learning experience, a glimpse into a world that operates by different rules than the one they know. What follows is the bank robbery we've already discussed, the catastrophe that breaks the gang and sends the survivors fleeing to Guarma. The party itself is a fascinating glimpse into St. Denis high society. The mansion is opulent, filled with the city's elite in their finest clothes. The conversation is sophisticated, touching on politics, business, and culture. Dutch tries to fit in, deploying his considerable charm, but he's clearly out of place. These people have a different kind of power than Dutch understands, and they're not impressed by his frontier charisma. The guests Arthur encounters represent a cross-section of the city's intellectual and cultural stagnation, masquerading as progress. There is the writer with his agonizingly pretentious observations about the human condition, oblivious to the real human suffering just miles away in the slums. There is the feminist theorist who speaks of liberation in abstract terms while being served by an invisible army of underpaid staff. Dealing with these characters requires Arthur to navigate a minefield of social etiquette that is far more treacherous than any shootout. One wrong word, one slip of the tongue, and the illusion of civility shatters. It is a test of patience, A different kind of endurance than riding through a storm, but endurance nonetheless. The architecture of the party itself, the courtyard, the placement of the champagne fountains, the orchestra playing polite waltzes, stands in stark contrast to the swamp mud that Arthur is still scrubbing from his boots. Every surface is polished, every laugh is calibrated. The air smells of expensive perfume and pipe tobacco, masking the underlying scent of the city's industry. It is a bubble of delusion, a place where the rich reassure themselves that they are the pinnacles of civilization, while outside their gates the world they built on exploitation grinds on. Dutch's desperation to be accepted by this crowd is painful to watch. He name drops, he postures, he laughs too loudly at jokes he doesn't fully understand. He sees himself as a peer to these men, a man of letters, a philosopher king. But to them he is, at best, a novelty, and at worst, a nuisance. Bronte watches this performance with the amusement of a puppeteer, knowing that he holds the strings. This dynamic, Dutch clinging to a fantasy of high status, outlaw nobility while being treated like a hired thug, is the core tragedy of the chapter. Arthur's observations at the party are particularly revealing. He sees through the pretense of civilization, recognizing that these wealthy, cultured people are just as predatory as any outlaw. They've simply learned to dress up their predation in respectable clothes. The party is a reminder that the line between legitimate and criminal is a matter of perspective and power. Betrayal and revenge. The robbery that follows the party is a disaster. Bronte has set the gang up, providing information that leads them into a trap. The job goes wrong, people die, and the gang barely escapes. This betrayal marks the end of any pretense of alliance between Bronte and the Van der Linde gang. Dutch's response to Bronte's betrayal reveals how much he's changed. The Dutch of earlier years might have cut his losses and moved on. This Dutch wants revenge. He becomes obsessed with punishing Bronte, with proving that no one can betray Dutch van der Linde and get away with it. The assault on Bronte's mansion is one of the most violent sequences in the game. The gang attacks in force, fighting through Bronte's guards to reach the man himself. The battle is brutal, with casualties on both sides. When they finally capture Bronte, Dutch's treatment of him is shocking. Dutch feeds Bronte to an alligator. This act of cruelty is a turning point, a moment when Dutch crosses a line that can't be uncrossed. It's not just that he kills Bronte, it's how he kills him, with a sadistic pleasure that disturbs even his loyal followers. Arthur watches in horror, seeing a side of Dutch he's never seen before. This moment crystallizes something that's been building throughout the St. Denis chapters. Dutch is losing himself, becoming something darker and more dangerous than the charismatic leader Arthur has followed for 20 years. The city hasn't created this darkness, it's revealed it, stripped away the pretenses that allowed Dutch to see himself as a noble outlaw rather than a violent criminal. The bank job, the beginning of the end. The bank robbery in St. Denis is the gang's most ambitious operation in the city and their most catastrophic failure. Dutch plans the job meticulously, seeing it as the score that will finally set them free. The take will be enormous, enough to fund their escape to a new life somewhere beyond the reach of the law. The planning process reveals the tensions within the gang. Some members are enthusiastic, seeing the robbery as their ticket to freedom. Others are skeptical, worried about the risks of such a high-profile job in a city where they're already known to the authorities. Dutch dismisses these concerns, insisting that his plan is foolproof. The robbery itself starts well enough. The gang enters the bank, takes control, and begins accessing the vault. But things quickly go wrong. The police respond faster than expected. Reinforcements arrive. What was supposed to be a quick in-and-out job becomes a siege. The tactical failure here is absolute, and it stems from Dutch's fundamental misunderstanding of the city. He treats the Lemoyne National Bank like a stagecoach or a small-town safe. He assumes that force and intimidation will work, that he can control the variable. But a city bank is part of a larger system. Alarm bells ring. Telegraphs are sent. Police are mobilized from multiple precincts instantly. The gang is not fighting a few deputies, they are fighting an infrastructure. They are pinned down not just by gunfire, but by the sheer weight of the city's resources. The ensuing firefight is a meat grinder. The bank's marble lobby, a symbol of stability and wealth, becomes charnel house. Glass shatters, wood splinters, and the air fills with the deafening roar of enclosed gunfire. It is a chaotic, desperate struggle that stands in stark contrast to the open-air skirmishes of previous chapters. Here, there is no cover, no flank to turn, no space to maneuver. The gang is trapped in a box of their own making, besieged by a modern world that has finally marshalled enough force to crush them. The escape from the bank is a running battle through the streets of St. Denis. Gang members fall. Hosea is killed. Lenny is killed. The survivors fight their way to the docks, where they hope to escape by boat. But the police are everywhere, and the gang is trapped. The deaths of Hosea and Lenny are devastating blows to the gang. Hosea was the voice of reason, the one who could sometimes talk Dutch back from the edge. Lenny was young and full of potential, a symbol of the gang's future. Their deaths mark the end of any hope that the gang can survive intact. Jagri returned to a changed city. The survivors escape St. Denis by boat, eventually washing up in Guarma, a Caribbean island far from everything they know. But even in exile, the shadow of St. Denis hangs over them. The city has broken something in the gang that can't be repaired. The family that Dutch always talked about is falling apart, and St. Denis is where the fractures became fatal. The return to St. Denis after Guarma is haunted by what happened before. The gang is diminished, traumatized, hunted. The city that once seemed full of opportunity now feels like a trap. Every street corner might hide a Pinkerton agent. Every face might belong to someone who wants them dead. Arthur's missions in St. Denis during this period are often melancholy. He's tying up loose ends, saying goodbye to people and places he'll never see again. The city that overwhelmed him when he first arrived now feels almost familiar, but it's a familiarity tinged with loss. The encounter with the nun, Sister Calderon, takes place in St. Denis. This conversation, which we explored in depth in our analysis of Arthur's psychology, is one of the most important in the game. The city provides the setting for Arthur's spiritual reckoning, a place where the noise and chaos of modern life somehow creates space for quiet reflection. Sitting on a bench at the train station, waiting for a train that will take her away to Mexico, Sister Calderon becomes Arthur's confessor. For the first time, the hardened outlaw drops his guard completely. "I'm afraid," he admits, his voice cracking. It is a moment of devastating vulnerability, made possible by the anonymity of the city. In the camp, Arthur must always be the enforcer, the strong man. Here, among strangers, he is free to be simply a dying man. Sister Calderon's response: "Take a gamble that love exists and do a loving act. is the counter-thesis to everything Dutch stands for. While Dutch preaches loyalty and faith, which are tribal, exclusionary virtues, Calderon preaches universal love. This philosophy, offered in the heart of the corrupt city, becomes Arthur's guiding light in his final days. It is the ultimate irony. He finds more spiritual truth in a St. Denis train station than he ever did in the pristine wilderness. The final missions in St. Denis involve confronting the remnants of the gang's enemies in the city. These are clean-up operations, necessary but joyless. The grand ambitions that brought the gang to St. Denis have collapsed into mere survival. The city has won, as it always wins against those who think they can beat it. 6. Themes and legacy. St. Denis represents something larger than itself in the world of Red Dead Redemption 2. It's a symbol of the future that's coming. The industrial, urban, modern future that will sweep away the Old West and everything it represents. Dutch van der Linde has built his identity around resistance to this future. He talks constantly about freedom, about living outside the constraints of civilization, about the corruption of modern society. St. Denis is everything he claims to hate. Crowded, regulated, controlled by money and power rather than individual strength and cunning. But Dutch is also drawn to St. Denis in ways he doesn't fully understand. He's attracted to its sophistication, its culture, its possibilities. He wants to prove that he can succeed in this environment, that his skills translate to the modern world. His engagement with Bronte, his attendance at the mayor's party, his ambitious bank robbery, all reflect this desire to conquer the city on its own terms. This contradiction is at the heart of Dutch's character. He preaches freedom but craves recognition. He condemns civilization but wants its rewards. He claims to be fighting for a better world, but is really fighting for his own ego. St. Denis exposes these contradictions, forcing Dutch to confront the gap between his rhetoric and his reality. Arthur's relationship with St. Denis is different. He doesn't share Dutch's ideological opposition to civilization, but he's also uncomfortable in the urban environment. Arthur is a creature of the wilderness, most at home in the mountains and forests where he can be alone with his thoughts. The city's crowds and noise and complexity exhaust him, but Arthur also sees things in St. Denis that Dutch misses. He sees the poverty and exploitation that underlie the city's prosperity. He sees the corruption that makes a mockery of law and order. He sees that the civilization Dutch condemns is not as different from the outlaw life as Dutch pretends. Both worlds are built on violence and exploitation. They just dress it up differently. This insight is part of Arthur's growing disillusionment with Dutch and the gang. If civilization is corrupt, but the outlaw life is also corrupt, then what's the point of the struggle? What are they fighting for? These questions haunt Arthur as he moves through St. Denis, seeing the city's contradictions reflected in his own life. Architecture of power. The architecture of St. Denis tells its own story. The buildings are characters in their own right, expressing the values and aspirations of those who built them. The city hall is a different kind of statement. It's built in the Beaux-Arts style, with classical columns and elaborate ornamentation that proclaim the power and legitimacy of civil government. The building says that St. Denis is a serious city, worthy of respect, capable of governing itself according to the highest standards. But the grandeur of City Hall is somewhat ironic, given the corruption that flourishes within. The beautiful building houses a political machine that serves the interests of the few at the expense of the many. The gap between the building's aspirations and its reality is a metaphor for the city itself. The mansions of the Garden District are private statements of wealth and taste. Each one is unique, reflecting the personality and aspirations of its owner. Some are restrained and classical, suggesting old money and established position. Others are flamboyant and eclectic, announcing that their owners have arrived and don't care what anyone thinks. These mansions are fortresses as well as homes, designed to keep the chaos of the city at bay. Their walls and gates create private worlds where the wealthy can live according to their own rules. The contrast with the tenements of the slums could not be more stark. The factories of the industrial district are a different kind of architecture entirely. They are functional rather than decorative, designed to house machinery and workers as efficiently as possible. Their brick walls and smoking chimneys are monuments to production, to the transformation of raw materials into finished goods. But the factories are also monuments to exploitation. Their design prioritizes output over worker welfare. The conditions inside are often dangerous and unhealthy. The architecture of industry is the architecture of profit, and profit comes at a human cost. The sound of progress. The sounds of St. Denis create an atmosphere unlike anywhere else in the game. This city has its own soundtrack, a constant background of noise that shapes the experience of being there. The trolley bells are perhaps the most distinctive sound, their clanging announcing the arrival and departure of the streetcars that crisscross the city. The trolleys are a symbol of modernity, of a city that has embraced new technology to move its people efficiently. Their bells are the heartbeat of urban life. But they represent more than just transportation. They represent the mechanization of time and space. In the wilderness, you move at the speed of a horse, governed by the terrain and the sun. On the trolley, you move at the speed of the machine, on a fixed track, on a fixed schedule. You are a passenger, not a driver. For the player, riding the trolley is a passive experience, a surrender of control that mirrors the larger narrative theme, the loss of agency in the face of progress. The electric spark that drives these cars is the same power that lights the streets and powers the factories, a web of energy that binds the city together and binds the individual to the system. The clanging bell is not just a warning to pedestrians, it is a toll for the death of the old ways. The street vendors add their voices to the mix, calling out their wares in a dozen languages. Fresh fish, hot food, newspapers, flowers. The vendors offer everything a city dweller might need. Their cries are a form of advertising designed to cut through the noise and attract customers. The horses and carriages create their own sounds, the clop of hooves on cobblestones, the creak of wheels, the shouts of drivers navigating the crowded streets. Despite the trolleys and the talk of automobiles, horses remain essential to the city's transportation. Their sounds are a link to the past, a reminder that St. Denis is still in transition between eras. The factories contribute a constant industrial drone, the sound of machinery working around the clock. This sound is loudest near the industrial district but carries throughout the city, a reminder of the economic engine that drives everything. The factory sounds are the sound of progress, for better or worse. The music that spills from saloons and dance halls adds a human element to the urban symphony. Ragtime piano, brass bands, singing voices. The music of St. Denis is joyful and melancholy, celebratory and mournful. It's the sound of people finding pleasure and meaning in a difficult world. At night, the sounds change. The commercial bustle fades, replaced by the sounds of entertainment and vice. Laughter and arguments drift from the bars. The occasional gunshot echoes through the streets. The night sounds of St. Denis are more dangerous, more exciting, more alive. The rain transforms the city's soundscape entirely. The patter of drops on roofs and streets, the rush of water in gutters, the thunder that rolls across the sky, all create a different atmosphere. Rain in St. Denis is frequent and heavy, a reminder of the city's precarious relationship with water. Morning in St. Denis is a time of awakening. The streets fill with workers heading to their jobs, vendors setting up their stalls, and delivery wagons making their rounds. The light is soft and golden, filtering through the morning mist that often blankets the city. There's an energy to the morning, a sense of possibility and purpose. The sounds of morning are distinctive. The clatter of hooves on cobblestones, the calls of vendors, the bells of the trolleys beginning their daily routes. The city is coming alive, shaking off the torpor of night and preparing for the business of the day. Afternoon brings the full intensity of urban life. The streets are crowded with people going about their business. The shops are busy with customers. The factories are running at full capacity, their smoke adding to the haze that hangs over the city. The afternoon sun beats down, making the streets hot and uncomfortable. The sounds of afternoon are louder and more chaotic. The constant background noise of a city at work, the shouts and conversations and mechanical sounds that blend into an urban symphony. The energy is different from morning, more frantic and less hopeful. Evening brings a transition. The workers head home, the shops begin to close, and the character of the streets changes. The entertainment district comes alive as the saloons and theatres open their doors. The gas lamps are lit, casting pools of golden light on the cobblestones. The sounds of evening are different again. Music from the saloons, laughter and conversation from people enjoying their leisure time, the occasional shout or argument. The energy is more relaxed but also more dangerous as the night brings out those who prefer to operate in darkness. Night in St. Denis is a different world entirely. The respectable citizens are home, and the streets belong to those who work or play after dark. The entertainment district is in full swing, with music and revelry spilling into the streets. The darker corners of the city come alive with activities that daylight would expose. The sounds of night are more intimate. The music from a nearby saloon, the conversation of passers-by, the distant sounds of the city that never fully sleeps. The darkness creates a sense of possibility and danger, of things happening that can't be seen. Heat shimmers off the cobblestones in summer. Rain pounds the rooftops in sudden, violent storms. Fog rolls in from the bayou, transforming familiar streets into something mysterious. The subtropical climate shapes every aspect of life here, from architecture to culture to daily routine. The heat and humidity of summer are oppressive. The air is thick and heavy, making every movement an effort. The wealthy retreat to their air-cooled mansions or escape to resorts in the mountains. The poor suffer in their tenements, seeking relief in the shade or the river. Summer in St. Denis is a test of endurance. The rain comes frequently, often in sudden, violent storms that flood the streets and overwhelm the drainage systems. These storms are beautiful and terrifying, with lightning that illuminates the city and thunder that shakes the buildings. The rain brings relief from the heat, but also brings danger, as the city's low-lying areas are vulnerable to flooding. The fog that sometimes blankets the city creates an eerie atmosphere. Buildings emerge from the mist like ghosts. Sounds are muffled and distorted. The fog transforms St. Denis into something mysterious and slightly sinister, a city of secrets and hidden dangers. The winters are mild compared to the north, but they bring their own challenges. The damp cold penetrates to the bone, and the poor suffer without adequate heating. The social season reaches its peak in winter, with balls and parties filling the calendars of the wealthy. Winter is when St. Denis society is most active and most visible. The changing seasons affect the city's economy as well. The shipping industry slows during hurricane season, when storms make the Gulf dangerous. The agricultural cycle determines when cotton and other crops flow through the city. The rhythm of the seasons is the rhythm of commerce. When the sun goes down, St. Denis transforms. The respectable facades give way to something wilder, more dangerous, more alive. The city reveals a different face than the one it shows during the day. The saloons are the most accessible form of night entertainment. They range from elegant establishments serving fine whiskey to rough joints where the drinks are cheap and the fights are frequent. The saloons are democratic spaces where people of different classes can drink together, though the fancier places enforce their own hierarchies. The gambling halls offer games of chance for every budget. Poker, blackjack, roulette, faro. The games vary, but the essential transaction is the same: the hope of winning big against the reality of the house edge. The gambling halls are places of drama where fortunes are made and lost in a single night. The brothels cater to desires that respectable society pretends don't exist. They range from elegant houses with beautiful women and discreet service to squalid cribs where desperate women sell themselves for pennies. The sex trade is technically illegal but openly tolerated, a source of revenue for the police and politicians who are supposed to suppress it. The opium dens offer a different kind of escape. In these dim, smoky rooms, customers chase the dragon, seeking the blissful oblivion that the drug provides. Opium use is widespread in St. Denis, cutting across class and racial lines. The dens are places of equality and addiction, where the wealthy and the poor lie side by side in narcotic dreams. The theatres and music halls offer more respectable entertainment. Vaudeville shows feature comedy, music, and spectacle. The Opera House presents productions that rival anything in New York or Paris. The entertainment industry is big business in St. Denis, employing hundreds and attracting visitors from throughout the region. The streets themselves become entertainment venues at night. Musicians play for tips, performers demonstrate their skills, vendors sell food and drink to the crowds. The night streets of St. Denis are a carnival, a celebration of life in all its variety. The future is coming. The future of St. Denis, as glimpsed in the game, is one of continued growth and change. The city is on the cusp of the 20th century, poised to become even larger, more modern, more complex. The automobile is coming, though it's barely present in 1899. The horseless carriage will transform urban transportation, making the trolleys obsolete and reshaping the city's geography. The automobile will bring freedom and pollution, convenience and danger. The airplane is coming too, though no one in St. Denis can imagine it yet. The Wright brothers are still years away from Kitty Hawk. But the age of flight will transform the world, shrinking distances and connecting places in ways that seem impossible in 1899. The movies are coming, the technology exists, and entrepreneurs are beginning to see its potential. Soon, theatres will show moving pictures, creating a new form of entertainment that will reshape culture. St. Denis, with its love of spectacle, will embrace the movies enthusiastically. The radio is coming, bringing news and entertainment into homes. The phonograph is already here, allowing music to be recorded and replayed. These technologies will transform how people experience culture, making it possible to hear performances without being present. The 20th century will bring world wars, economic depressions, civil rights movements, technological revolutions. St. Denis will experience all of these, changing and adapting as it always has. The city that Arthur Morgan sees in 1899 is just one moment in a long history that stretches into a future he can't imagine. But the game also suggests that some things won't change. The inequality, the corruption, the exploitation, these are not accidents of a particular era, but features of how power operates. The future will bring new technologies and new challenges, but the fundamental dynamics of St. Denis, the concentration of wealth, the manipulation of politics, the suffering of the poor, will persist. Legacy. The legacy of St. Denis extends beyond the game itself. The city has become one of the most memorable locations in video game history, a place that players remember and discuss long after they've finished playing. Part of this legacy is technical. St. Denis represents a remarkable achievement in game design, a fully realised urban environment with thousands of NPCs, complex systems, and incredible detail. The city demonstrates what's possible in open-world game design, setting a standard that other games aspire to match. Part of the legacy is artistic. St. Denis is beautiful in its own way, a vision of a historical city brought to life with care and attention. The architecture, the atmosphere, the sense of place, all reflect the work of artists who understood what they were creating. Part of the legacy is narrative. St. Denis is where some of the game's most important events occur, where characters are tested and transformed. The city is inseparable from the story, a character in its own right that shapes everything that happens within it. And part of the legacy is thematic. St. Denis raises questions about progress, about civilization, about the costs and benefits of modernity. These questions resonate beyond the game, touching on issues that remain relevant today. The city is a meditation on what we've gained and what we've lost as society has changed. Conclusion. St. Denis stands as one of the great achievements of Red Dead Redemption 2, a fully realised urban environment that serves the game's themes while providing countless hours of exploration and discovery. The city is a character in its own right, shaping everyone who enters it and being shaped by them in turn. The attention to detail in St. Denis is remarkable. Every building, every street corner, every NPC has been crafted with care. The city rewards exploration, revealing new details and secrets to those who take the time to look. It's a place you can return to again and again and still find something new. The thematic richness of St. Denis elevates it beyond mere setting. The city embodies ideas about progress, civilization, corruption, and change that resonate throughout the game. It's not just a place where things happen, it's a statement about what those things mean. The emotional impact of St. Denis is profound. The city is where the Van der Linde gang's dreams finally die, where beloved characters are lost, where the reality of the modern world becomes impossible to deny. The memories of what happens in St. Denis stay with players long after they've moved on. St. Denis is the future that was coming for the Old West, the world that would replace the frontier and everything it represented. It's a world of opportunity and exploitation, of progress and corruption, of civilization and its discontents. It's our world in embryonic form, and seeing it through Arthur Morgan's eyes helps us understand both where we came from and where we are. the lasting impression of St. Denis is one of complexity and contradiction. The city defies simple characterization, refusing to be either villain or victim, either progress or decay. It simply is, in all its messy, vibrant, troubled reality. For players experiencing St. Denis for the first time, the city is overwhelming. The density of detail, the constant activity, the sheer scale of the place, all combine to create sensory overload. This is intentional, designed to mirror the experience of the characters who are equally overwhelmed by urban life. For players returning to St. Denis after completing the game, the city takes on new meanings. The streets where Arthur walked become memorials. The locations where events occurred become sacred spaces. The city that once seemed merely impressive becomes emotionally charged, every corner holding memories. The design philosophy behind St. Denis represents a commitment to authenticity and immersion that sets Red Dead Redemption 2 apart. The developers didn't just create a city, they created a world, complete with history, culture, economy, and society. This depth of creation is what makes St. Denis feel real, what makes players care about what happens there. The technical achievements of St. Denis are equally impressive. The city runs smoothly despite its complexity, maintaining the frame rates and responsiveness that gameplay requires. The AI systems that govern NPC behavior create a convincing simulation of urban life. The visual fidelity captures the atmosphere of a turn-of-the-century city with remarkable accuracy. The sound design deserves special mention. The layered audio of St. Denis creates an immersive soundscape that changes based on location, time of day, and weather. The distant factory whistles, the nearby conversations, the ever-present trolley bells, all combine to create an audio environment that feels authentically urban. Close your eyes and you can almost smell the smoke and the river. But the greatest achievement of St. Denis is emotional rather than technical. The city makes players feel something, whether it's wonder at its scale, disgust at its corruption, sorrow at its tragedies, or nostalgia for its lost possibilities. St. Denis is not just a place to visit, it's a place to experience, to remember, to carry with you. The story of St. Denis is ultimately the story of America at a turning point. The city represents the transition from one era to another, from the frontier to the modern world, from independence to interdependence, from simplicity to complexity. This transition was painful and disruptive, creating winners and losers, destroying old ways of life while creating new ones. Arthur Morgan witnesses this transition and is destroyed by it. He belongs to the old world, the world of open spaces and personal freedom, and there's no place for him in the new world that St. Denis represents. His tragedy is the tragedy of everyone who couldn't adapt, who was left behind by progress, who paid the price for changes they didn't choose. But Arthur also finds something in St. Denis that he couldn't find elsewhere. He finds perspective on his own life, understanding of what really matters, and the beginnings of redemption. The city that destroys him also transforms him, forcing him to confront truths he'd been avoiding and to make choices that define who he really is. St. Denis is where Arthur Morgan's story reaches its crisis and begins its resolution. The city is both antagonist and catalyst, both obstacle and opportunity. It's the crucible in which Arthur is tested and transformed, the place where he discovers what he's made of. The conversations Arthur has in St. Denis are among the most important in the game. His talks with Sister Calderon about faith and redemption, his encounters with the city's diverse inhabitants, his observations of wealth and poverty existing side by side. These experiences shape his understanding of himself and the world, contributing to the transformation that defines his final chapters. The missions Arthur undertakes in St. Denis are equally significant, helping strangers in need, confronting the city's criminals and corrupt officials, navigating the complex social hierarchies that govern urban life. Each mission teaches Arthur something about the world he's entering and the world he's leaving behind. And when the story's over, when Arthur has watched his last sunrise and the credits have rolled, St. Denis remains. The city continues its endless cycle of commerce and corruption, of birth and death, of progress and decay. The trolleys run, the factories smoke, the music plays. Life goes on, as it always does, in the city that never stops changing and never really changes at all. That is the final truth of St. Denis. It endures. Outlaws come and go, empires rise and fall, but the city remains, adapting and evolving, absorbing new influences and creating new forms. St. Denis was here before the Van der Linde gang arrived, and it will be here long after they're forgotten. And somewhere in the French Quarter, as the sun sets over the Lanahetchie River, the trolley bells ring their familiar song. The vendors call their wares one last time before closing up for the night. The smoke rises from the factories, painting the sky in shades of orange and grey. Music drifts from the saloons, ragtime piano and brass bands playing the songs that will one day be called jazz. This is St. Denis at twilight, caught between day and night, between past and future, between the world that was and the world that's coming. The city doesn't know what the 20th century will bring, the wars and depressions and revolutions that will reshape everything. It only knows this moment, this evening, this particular configuration of light and sound and life. Arthur Morgan rode through these streets. He saw these buildings, heard these sounds, breathed this air thick with smoke and possibility. He came to St. Denis looking for a score and found something else entirely. A mirror that showed him who he really was, a crucible that burned away everything false, a city that broke him and remade him in the breaking. The Van der Linde gang is gone now, scattered to the winds of history. Dutch is dead. Arthur is dead. The others have moved on to new lives or early graves, but St. Denis remains, indifferent to their fates, absorbed in its own endless drama of commerce and corruption, birth and death, progress and decay. The city doesn't remember them. Cities don't remember individuals. They remember events, and even those fade with time. The bank robbery that killed Hosea and Lenny is already becoming a footnote, one more violent incident in a city that has seen countless violent incidents. The names of the dead are already being forgotten. But we remember, we who played the game, who walked these streets through Arthur's eyes, who felt the weight of his choices and the tragedy of his fate. We carry St. Denis with us, not as the city remembers itself, but as we experienced it, a place of wonder and horror, of beauty and corruption, of life lived intensely in the shadow of death. That is the gift St. Denis gives us, not just a setting for a story, but a world to inhabit, a place to explore, a mirror for our own questions about progress and civilization, and what we're willing to sacrifice for the future we're building. The city asks us to look, really look, at what we've created and what we've destroyed in the name of progress. The trolley bells still ring, the vendors still call their wares, the smoke still rises from the factories, and somewhere in the French Quarter, Music plays, celebrating life in the shadow of death, finding joy in a world of sorrow. That is St. Denis. That is its story. And that story, like the city itself, goes on,